The council chamber fell silent as the lights dimmed. Vex then stood at the center of the room, his gray scales reflecting the glow of the holographic display behind him. He was old now, older than most Corvani diplomats who held his position. 15 years of studying humans had aged him in ways that time alone could not explain. "What you are about to see," he said, his voice steady but tired, "represents classified combat footage from the Battle of Proxima Station. I warn you, some of this will be difficult to watch." The assembled representatives shifted in their seats. There were 7 species present, each one a major power within the galactic hegemony. They had built an alliance that spanned 3,000 star systems. They had conquered, traded, and negotiated their way to dominance over 8 centuries. And now they gathered to discuss a single species that had achieved spaceflight barely 200 years ago. The hologram flickered to life. It showed a space station, its metal corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. Corvani shock troops advanced through the hallways in perfect formation. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that could stop most projectile weapons. Each soldier carried a plasma rifle capable of melting through steel. And then the humans appeared. They were smaller, softer. They wore simple armor that looked primitive compared to Corvani equipment. But they did not retreat. They did not surrender. They opened fire from behind makeshift barricades and kept firing even as their positions were overwhelmed. "Watch this soldier," Vex then said, pointing to a human female on the left side of the display. She takes a plasma burn to her left arm. The limb is effectively destroyed. Standard doctrine for any species would be immediate withdrawal or surrender. The council watched as the woman screamed, fell back against a wall, and then rose again. She switched her weapon to her remaining hand and continued shooting. She killed 2 more Corvani soldiers before a second shot brought her down. She fought for another 47 seconds, after receiving a wound that would incapacitate any Corvani warrior instantly. Vex then continued. This was not an isolated incident. Of the 300 humans defending Proxima Station, not one attempted to surrender. Not one. Fleet Commander Torvan leaned forward in his seat. He was a veteran of 12 major campaigns, a military genius by any standard. His species, the Dravosi, had never lost a war, but there was something in his eyes that the other council members had never seen before. Fear. "Ambassador," Torvan said slowly, "what is their pain tolerance rated at? There must be some biological explanation." 18. 23. $18. 23 time. 23 time. Ambassador Torvan said slowly. Torvan said slowly. Torvan said slowly. "We have studied captured humans extensively," Vex then replied. "Their pain receptors function normally. They feel everything we would feel. They simply choose to continue fighting regardless." A murmur passed through the council. The Solari representative, a delicate being with translucent skin and 4 arms, raised one of her hands. "Surely this is some form of genetic modification. Chemical enhancement. Something." "No," Vex then said. "They are baseline organics. No modifications. No enhancements. They train their minds to overcome what their bodies tell them. They have a concept they call willpower. It is not a physical attribute. It is purely psychological. And we have no equivalent." The hologram shifted to show another battle. This time it was ground combat on a jungle world. Human soldiers moved through dense vegetation, hunting Corvani patrols with patience and precision. They set traps. They used the environment. They attacked at night when Corvani vision was weakest, even though human night vision was equally limited. They carried lights, Torvan observed. They could have used them to see. They chose not to, Vex then explained. They learned to fight in darkness because it hurt them less than it hurt us. They deliberately accepted a disadvantage because it gave them a psychological edge. This is how they think. They find weakness and they exploit it, even if it costs them. Young Yurik stepped forward. She was an intelligence analyst, barely 30 cycles old, but she had spent 5 years intercepting and translating human military communications. What she had learned kept her awake at night. "Council members," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "I need to share something important. The soldiers we have faced so far, the ones in these recordings, represent what humans call standard infantry. Regular army units." The council waited. "Humans categorize their warriors into different levels. The soldiers we have encountered are considered baseline. Adequate. Nothing special by their standards." Urix paused, to let this sink in. "Above them are what they call Special Operations Forces. Elite units. The best of their best." Admiral Tethrix, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony Fleet, spoke for the first time. His voice was calm but carried an edge of concern. "And what do we know about these elite forces?" "Very little," Urix admitted. "Their existence is heavily classified. What we do know comes from intercepted communications and fragments of intelligence reports. They operate in small groups, sometimes as few as 4 or 6 individuals. They train for years, sometimes decades. They are selected from millions of candidates. The failure rate in their training programs exceeds 90%. "Oh, 6 individuals," Torvan repeated. "What can 6 individuals accomplish?" Urix pulled up another display. It showed a military installation on a moon at the edge of Corvani space. 3 months ago, this facility housed 4,000 of our soldiers. It was one of our most secure forward bases. One night, the power failed. Communications went dark. When reinforcements arrived 2 days later, they found the entire garrison dead or unconscious. Security systems had been disabled. Command officers had been killed in their sleep. Supply stores had been destroyed, and there was no sign of the attackers. The council stared at the images in silence. "Our best estimate," Urix continued, "is that this was accomplished by a team of 8 to 12 humans. We have no footage because they destroyed every recording device on the base. We have no survivors who saw them because they operated entirely in darkness and silence. We only know they were human because they left a message written on the wall of the command center." "What did it say?" Admiral Tethrix asked. Urix hesitated. "It said, 'You have not yet met our best. Consider this a warning.'" The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Vexes then watched the faces of the council members and saw what he had expected to see. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had never known true fear. They had never faced an enemy they could not overwhelm with numbers or technology. Now they understood something terrible. Regular human soldiers were dangerous, unpredictable, hard to kill. But somewhere out there, in training facilities and classified bases across human space, there were warriors that even other humans considered exceptional. Warriors who made regular soldiers look ordinary. Warriors who had dedicated their entire lives to becoming the most effective killing machines their species could produce. And the hegemony had just made enemies of them. Torvan was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "What have we done?" No one had an answer. General Krathos stood on the balcony of his command center and looked out over the mining colony of Kareth Prime. 40,000 Dravosi warriors served under his command. The defensive grid could stop an invasion fleet. Underground bunkers held enough supplies for a 2-year siege. By any military calculation, this colony was untouchable. The humans had sent a diplomatic vessel. 12 life signs on board. Krathos had laughed when he received the scanner report. 12. The humans were either stupid or desperate, probably both. The vessel landed at the designated port, and Krathos sent his guards to escort the delegation. He had already decided what would happen. The humans would be taken hostage. Their government would be forced to negotiate from a position of weakness. It was a simple plan, elegant in its brutality. The leader of the human delegation was a man named Jake Hartley. He was average height, average build, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He wore a simple suit and carried no visible weapons. When the Dravosi guards surrounded his team, he did not protest. He simply smiled politely and allowed himself to be led to the holding quarters. "They are not soldiers," one guard reported to Krathos. "They call themselves diplomatic security. Bodyguards." "Bodyguards," Krathos repeated with amusement. 12 bodyguards against 40,000 warriors. The humans truly are fools. The holding quarters were located in the center of the command complex, surrounded by 3 layers of security checkpoints. Armed guards patrolled every corridor. Surveillance systems monitored every angle. There was no possible way in or out without detection. That night, General Krathos went to sleep confident in his victory. He woke to find Jake Hartley sitting in a chair beside his bed. The human was cleaning his fingernails with a small knife. He looked relaxed, almost bored. The door to the bedroom was still locked. The windows were sealed. The security panel showed no alerts, no breaches, no unauthorized access. "Good evening, General," Jake said quietly. "I apologize for the intrusion." Krathos reached for the weapon under his pillow. It was gone. "I removed that about an hour ago," Jake explained. "I also disabled your communication device, your emergency beacon, and the silent alarm built into your headboard. You Dravosi are very thorough with your security measures. I respect that." The general's hearts were pounding. He was a warrior who had killed enemies with his bare hands. He was twice the size of this human. But something in Jake Hartley's eyes made him hesitate. There was no anger there, no excitement, no fear, just calm. "Professional assessment. How did you get in here?" Krathos demanded. "Through your ventilation system, mostly. Your architects designed it to be too narrow for Dravosi bodies. They did not consider that humans are somewhat smaller and considerably more flexible." Jake smiled slightly. "A common oversight. My guards will have noticed your absence from the holding quarters." "No," Jake said. "They will not have. My colleague Lisa is quite talented with security systems. As far as your monitors show, all 12 of us are sleeping peacefully in our assigned rooms." Krathos tried to process this information. "What do you want?" Jake set down his knife and leaned forward. "I want you to understand something, General. Right now, at this exact moment, my team has placed explosive charges on your main power generator, your backup power systems, your communication relay, and the fuel storage for your defensive grid. We have also identified and marked every member of your command staff for elimination." "Impossible. You are 12 people. We are 12 people who have spent our entire adult lives training for situations exactly like this one. Each of us has more combat experience than your entire officer corps combined. We do not fight like regular soldiers. We do not follow regular rules." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the colony was dark and quiet. 40,000 soldiers slept, unaware that their entire defensive structure had been compromised. "I could kill you right now," Jake continued. "I could kill your entire command staff. My team could trigger those explosives and cripple your defenses before your soldiers even wake up. By the time reinforcements arrived, we would be gone, and this colony would be in chaos." Krathos found his voice. "Then why haven't you?" "Because killing is not our objective. Our objective is to secure the release of human civilians held in your southern mining complex, and to establish terms for peaceful withdrawal from disputed territory." Jake turned to face the general. "We prefer negotiation. Violence is a tool we use only when necessary." "And if I refuse?" Jake's expression did not change. "Then I will contact my command, and within 6 hours, additional assets will be deployed to this location. Not soldiers like me. Different specialists, the ones we send when negotiation fails. More of your special forces?" "Navy," Jake said simply. "They are less patient than we are." For a long moment, Krathos said nothing. He was trying to understand how this had happened. He had 40,000 soldiers. He had defensive systems that could stop a fleet, and 12 humans had walked through all of it like it did not exist. "Your regular soldiers," Krathos said slowly. "The ones we have been fighting for the past 2 years. They are not your best." "No, General, they are not." "And you, your team, you are the best?" Jake considered the question. "We are among them. There are others who specialize in different environments, different situations. We are trained for direct action and hostage rescue. Others are trained for underwater operations, high-altitude insertion, deep reconnaissance, counterterrorism. Each branch has its own expertise. How many soldiers like you does humanity have?" "Enough," Jake said. "More than you want to test. Krathos thought about the reports he had read. The footage of human soldiers fighting through impossible odds. The intelligence briefings about small units accomplishing what entire armies could not. He had dismissed most of it as exaggeration, propaganda. Now he understood the truth. The humans they had been fighting were the ordinary ones. The extraordinary ones were standing in his bedroom, having bypassed every security measure his species could devise, and politely offering him a choice between peace and destruction. "What are your terms?" Krathos asked. Jake smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was the smile of a professional who preferred clean solutions to messy ones. "Release the human civilians. Withdraw your forces from the 3 disputed systems. Allow independent observers to monitor the transition. In exchange, we leave peacefully. And your superiors never need to know how badly your security failed tonight. And if I agree, you will simply leave?" "We will. You have my word." Krathos looked at the human standing before him. Small, soft, fragile by Dravosi standards, and yet more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. "How do I know you will keep your word?" Jake picked up his knife and slipped it back into his sleeve. "Because we are professionals, General. We do not lie, and we do not break agreements. That is what separates us from common soldiers. Our word is our bond, and our reputation depends on keeping it." There was no choice. Krathos knew that. He could fight and die, or he could accept the terms and survive. Pride demanded resistance. Intelligence demanded surrender. "I agree to your terms," Krathos said. Jake nodded once. "A wise decision. My team will restore your systems within the hour. The charges will be removed. By morning, you can begin the withdrawal process." He walked toward the door, then paused. "One last thing, General. When you report this to your superiors, I recommend honesty. Tell them what happened. Tell them what we are capable of. Perhaps it will prevent future misunderstandings." He opened the door, still locked, yet somehow opening at his touch, and disappeared into the darkness of the corridor. Krathos sat in his bed for a long time, staring at the empty room. He finally understood why the hegemony was afraid. The storm above Thessar IV was the worst in decades. Waves reached heights of 40 meters. Lightning cracked across the sky in sheets of electric fire. The Corvani security commander, Korolevex, watched the chaos from the observation deck of his underwater fortress and felt completely safe. His species had evolved on this world. They had gills that could filter oxygen from any water. Their bodies could withstand pressures that would crush most other beings. They could see in total darkness and navigate by sonar. In the ocean, the Corvani were untouchable. The human research team held in the lower detention levels would soon learn this truth. Their government had demanded their release. The Corvani had refused. Now, the humans would send their warships, and those warships would face the fury of Thessar IV's oceans. They would sink, and the Corvani would win, and the galaxy would understand that some environments could never be conquered. 600 meters below the surface, Chief Petty Officer Danny Reeves checked his equipment one final time. His team had deployed from a stealth shuttle during the storm, entering the water through the chaos of the waves where no scanner would detect them. Now they were descending through the darkness toward their target. There were 6 of them, 6 humans in a world designed to kill them. "Comcheck," Danny said through his underwater radio. 5 voices responded. Kyle, Megan, Tony, Victor, Sarah. Each one had trained for 18 months specifically for this mission. They had studied Corvani biology, memorized the fortress schematics, and practiced underwater combat until their bodies moved automatically. They were Navy SEALs. Water was not their enemy. Water was their home. "Remember," Danny continued, "no gunfire unless absolutely necessary. Sound travels faster underwater. We stay quiet. We stay invisible. We get our people out." The fortress appeared below them as a cluster of lights in the darkness. It was massive, a city-sized structure built into the ocean floor. Thousands of Corvani lived and worked there. Hundreds of guards patrolled its corridors. Danny checked his depth gauge. 400 meters. His modified rebreather was working perfectly, scrubbing carbon dioxide and feeding him a precise oxygen mixture. His wetsuit regulated his body temperature despite the near-freezing water. Human technology compensating for human weakness. But technology was only part of the equation. The Corvani believed they were superior in the water because of biology. They were wrong. Superiority came from training, from discipline, from the willingness to push beyond natural limits. The seals had spent years becoming creatures of the water. Not as fast as Corvani, not as strong, but more patient, more precise, more deadly. The first patrol encountered Kyle at the northwestern perimeter. The Corvani guard was swimming a standard route, checking sensor stations, completely unaware that anything was wrong. Kyle drifted up from below, moving with the current, invisible in the darkness. His vibroblade found the gap between the guard's helmet and neck armor. The kill was instant and silent. Kyle secured the body to a support structure with weighted cables. It would not drift away. It would not be found until morning. One down. Megan and Tony took the eastern approach, eliminating 2 more guards near a maintenance hatch. Sarah and Victor handled the southern perimeter, disabling a sensor array before removing its operators. Danny moved alone through the central approach, slipping past patrols with movements so slow and controlled that he was effectively invisible. The Corvani had excellent underwater vision. But vision required light, and the seals carried none. The Corvani had natural sonar. But sonar detected movement, and the seals moved like ghosts. Using the ocean's own currents to mask their signatures, inside the fortress, Coral Vex received his first warning 3 hours after the insertion began. "Commander, we have lost contact with Perimeter Station 7. Coral Vex frowned. "Equipment failures happened. Send a repair team." "We already did, sir. They have not reported back." A cold feeling began to spread through Coral Vex's chest. He pulled up the security display. Perimeter stations 5, 6, 7, and 8 were all offline. The patrol routes in the northwestern sector had gone silent. Communications from the eastern maintenance section had stopped. "Lock down the detention level," Coral Vex ordered. All guards to high alert. But it was already too late. Danny Reeves had reached the detention level 15 minutes earlier. He had bypassed the lock on the emergency access hatch, using a code his team had extracted from a captured Corvani terminal. He had neutralized the 4 guards inside with a combination of blade work and hand-to-hand combat. He had found the human researchers in their cells, frightened but alive. "Stay quiet," Danny whispered to them. "We are getting you out." There were 8 researchers. Civilians. Scientists. They had no training for situations like this. Danny could see the terror in their eyes, the disbelief that rescue had actually come. "How many of you are there?" one researcher asked. "Enough," Danny said. "Now move." The extraction route was carefully planned. They would travel through maintenance corridors to a secondary airlock, then ascend through a natural volcanic vent that provided thermal cover against sensors. A submarine was waiting 2 kilometers away to retrieve them. They were halfway to the airlock when the alarms began. "Contact," Victor reported through the comm. 2 guards, eastern corridor, handled. 3 more in the ventilation junction, Sarah added. Clear. Coral Vex was now fully aware that his fortress had been invaded. He was also aware that he had no idea how many enemies he was facing. Reports came in from every section. Guards found dead at their posts, systems disabled, shadows moving through corridors that should have been secure. He ordered every available soldier to converge on the detention level. 300 Corvani warriors responded, swimming through the corridors at combat speed. They found the detention level empty. The cells were open. The guards were dead. The humans were gone. "Track them," Coral Vex commanded. "They cannot have gone far." But the seals were not trying to go far. They were trying to go up. The volcanic vent was exactly where intelligence had promised. Danny led the researchers into the thermal current, which would carry them upward while masking their heat signatures. Kyle and Megan took rearguard positions, watching for pursuit. It came. A squad of Corvani warriors entered the vent behind them, swimming with powerful strokes that closed the distance rapidly. They were faster than humans. Much faster. In open water, there would be no contest. But the vent was not open water. It was narrow, cluttered with rock formations and thermal vents that created unpredictable currents. The Corvani were faster, but they were also larger. They had to slow down to navigate the obstacles. Kyle did not slow down. He had trained in environments exactly like this. He knew how to use the rocks as cover, how to let the currents carry him, how to turn the environment into a weapon. The lead Corvani caught up to him in a narrow passage. Kyle let the warrior close the distance, then jammed his blade into a thermal vent. Superheated water exploded outward, blinding the Corvani and scalding exposed skin. Kyle was already moving, sliding past the thrashing warrior and continuing upward. Megan handled two more pursuers in a rock formation, using their own momentum against them, tangling them in the narrow space while she escaped through a gap too small for their bodies. The researchers reached the surface first, bursting through the waves into the chaos of the storm. The submarine was waiting, its hatch open, crew members ready to pull them aboard. Danny came up last, counting heads as his team emerged. 6 SEALs. 8 researchers, everyone accounted for. As the submarine descended into safe waters, Danny allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The mission was complete. 0 friendly casualties. Objectives achieved. 4 hours later, Coral Vex received a final transmission from the human command. It was simple and direct. Your hostages have been recovered. We recommend you reconsider future aggressive actions. The next team we send will not be as gentle. Coral Vex stared at the message for a long time. His fortress was in chaos. 17 guards were dead. His security systems had been proven worthless, and all of this had been accomplished by 6 humans in an environment where his species held every biological advantage. He sent his report to the Hegemony Council that same day. It contained only one recommendation: do not fight the humans in any environment. They will find a way to win. The Hegemony flagship Eternal Vigilance was the largest warship ever constructed. It stretched nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern. Its crew numbered over 50,000. Its defensive systems could repel an entire fleet. It was the symbol of hegemony power, and it had been chosen as the location for the most important military summit in a decade. Representatives from 7 species gathered in the central conference chamber. They had come to develop a strategy against humanity. After the disasters at Kareth Prime and Thessor IV, they could no longer afford to underestimate their enemy. Admiral Tethrix presided over the meeting. He was the supreme commander of all hegemony forces. A strategic genius who had won 30 major engagements without a single defeat. If anyone could find a way to counter human special forces, it was him. Let us begin with what we know, the admiral said. Human elite forces operate in small units, typically between 4 and 20 individuals. They prioritize stealth and precision over direct confrontation. They accept extreme personal risk to accomplish their objectives. The Solari general, a being named Veus, raised one of her 4 hands. Is there evidence of biological modification? Cybernetic enhancement? Some explanation for their capabilities? None. Tethrix replied. We have captured and examined several human soldiers. They are baseline organics. No genetic alterations. No artificial components. Their physical abilities are within normal parameters for their species. Then how do they accomplish what they accomplish? Training, the admiral said simply. They train constantly. They train in every environment imaginable. They train until their bodies fail, then they train more. They have programs that last years. With elimination rates above 90%, only the most exceptional individuals complete the process. Torvan, the Dravosi fleet commander, shook his massive head. This does not make sense. Training cannot explain what happened at Kareth Prime. 12 humans defeated 40,000 warriors. This is not a matter of skill. This is something else. It is a matter of mindset, said Vorn, the security chief. The humans do not think like we do. They do not see impossible situations. They see problems to be solved. They do not accept limitations. They find ways around them. The discussion continued for hours. They analyzed battle footage. They reviewed intelligence reports. They debated tactics and strategies. And through all of it, none of them noticed the 2 extra shadows in the back of the room. Sergeant First Class Chris Dunn had been aboard the Eternal Vigilance for 3 days. His partner, Staff Sergeant Amy Lawson, had joined him 2 days ago through a different entry point. They were members of the Intelligence Support Activity, an organization so classified that most human military personnel did not know it existed. Their mission was simple: gather intelligence on hegemony, military planning, and return home safely. They had accomplished the first part. Their recording devices had captured every word of the summit. Amy had also managed to download the ship's navigation database, weapons specifications, and crew manifests during a brief infiltration of the command center. Chris had mapped every security patrol route and identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in the flagship's defensive systems. Now they needed to accomplish the second part. The problem was that leaving the ship required accessing the shuttle bay, which required passing through multiple security checkpoints, which required being something other than stowaways on an alien warship surrounded by 50,000 crew members who would very much like to capture or kill them. Options? Amy whispered through her subvocal communicator. Limited, Chris replied. We could try for the maintenance shuttles in Section 47. Security is lighter there. Too far. We would have to cross 3 major corridors during shift change. Emergency pods? Not viable. They track all emergency launches automatically. They were hiding in a service duct above the conference chamber, watching the summit through a ventilation grate. The hegemony's greatest military minds were gathered directly below them, completely unaware of their presence. It was almost funny, in a dark way. There is another option, Amy said. We reveal ourselves. Chris considered this. Explain. We have already gathered everything we need. The mission is technically complete. If we surrender ourselves voluntarily, we become bargaining chips. Prisoners to be exchanged. It is safer than trying to fight our way out. They might not treat us as prisoners. They might treat us as spies and execute us. They might, but they want to understand us. They want to know how we do what we do. Dead operators cannot answer questions. Below them, Security Chief Vorn suddenly stopped speaking. He was staring at a display on his wrist, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Admiral, Vorn said, interrupting the current speaker. We have an anomaly. We have an anomaly. What kind of anomaly? Life support systems. For the past 72 hours, this section of the ship has been consuming oxygen at a rate slightly higher than our crew manifest should produce. Vorn's voice was steady, but there was fear underneath it. According to these readings, there are 2 extra oxygen consumers aboard. The room fell silent. Every representative turned to look at Security Chief Vorn, then at each other, then at the shadows around them. 50,000 crew members on this ship, and somehow, impossibly, someone had slipped aboard without detection. Chris looked at Amy. Amy looked at Chris. Time to say hello, Chris said. They dropped from the ventilation duct, landing softly on the conference room floor. Every weapon in the room immediately pointed at them. Chris raised his hands slowly. Amy did the same. Good afternoon, Chris said calmly. I am Sergeant First Class Chris Dunn. This is Staff Sergeant Amy Lawson. We represent the United States military, and, by extension, the human government. Admiral Tethrix stared at them. He was not a being who surprised easily, but this was beyond anything he had anticipated. 2 humans. On his flagship. In his conference room, after 3 days undetected. How? Tethrix demanded. How is this possible? Practice, Amy said. Lots of practice. Vorn was already calling for guards. Within seconds, the room was filled with armed soldiers. Chris and Amy did not resist. They stood calmly, hands raised, expressions neutral. You have been here for 3 days, Tethrix said slowly. Recording our summit. Yes, Chris admitted. You have accessed our systems, stolen our data. Also yes, and now you reveal yourselves willingly. Why? Chris smiled slightly. Because we have already accomplished our mission. Everything we learned is already transmitted to human command. Capturing us gains you nothing except 2 people who need to be fed and guarded. He paused. Also, we thought you might appreciate a demonstration. A demonstration of what? Of what we are capable of. You have been discussing strategies to defeat human special forces. You have analyzed our tactics. You have studied our methods. And while you were doing all of this, 2 of us were sitting in your most secure location, listening to every word. Amy stepped forward slightly. We are not the most skilled operators in our military. We are specialists in reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. The teams that handle direct action are considerably more dangerous than we are. You expect us to believe that? Torvon growled. We expect you to consider the implications, Chris replied. If 2 reconnaissance specialists can infiltrate your flagship undetected for 3 days, what could a full assault team accomplish? If we can bypass your security, what stops others from doing the same? Admiral Tethrix was silent for a long moment. He was thinking, processing, analyzing. This was what he did. This was why he was the supreme commander. You want us to fear you, he finally said. No, Amy replied. We want you to understand us. Fear is not our objective. Peace is our objective. We would prefer trade agreements and cultural exchange to warfare. But you chose to attack our colonies. You chose to take our people hostage. You chose this path. She reached into her pocket, slowly, carefully, and produced a small data chip. She set it on the conference table. This contains a message from our command, she said. It explains what we want and what we are willing to offer. It also contains some numbers you may find relevant. What numbers? Tethrix asked. Personnel counts. The operations you have encountered so far used 12 operators total. Our Special Operations Command has 40,000 personnel across 9 branches, each one trained to the same standard or higher. Amy paused. We hope you will consider the mathematics before making any further decisions. The guards escorted Chris and Amy out of the conference room. They would be held as prisoners for now, exchanged later through diplomatic channels. Their mission was complete. Behind them, Admiral Tethrix picked up the data chip and stared at it. 40,000. The hegemony had been struggling to counter 12. For the first time in his long career, the Admiral wondered if victory was even possible. 3 years had passed since the infiltration of the Eternal Vigilance. 3 years since the Galactic hegemony had agreed to formal peace negotiations. 3 years since humanity had secured its place among the stars through a reputation built on the actions of its most exceptional warriors. Jake Hartley sat in a small room in a veterans support center in Virginia. There were 8 other people in the circle with him, all former special operators, all struggling with the same invisible wounds. The galaxy saw them as terrifying weapons. They saw themselves as broken people trying to remember how to be normal. I keep having the same dream, said a man named Tony, who had served with the SEALs on Thesser IV. I am back in the water. I can see them coming. And I cannot make myself care. I just watch them get closer and closer, and I feel nothing. Jake nodded. He understood. When you trained yourself to function without emotion in combat, sometimes the emotions did not come back. Sometimes the switch got stuck. The hardest part, Jake said, is that everyone thinks we enjoyed it. They see the medals and the commendations and they think we must be proud. But nobody asks what it costs. The group facilitator, a retired Army psychologist named Grace, leaned forward. What does it cost? Jake thought about it. He thought about the nights he could not sleep, the relationships he could not maintain, the way his hands sometimes shook. When he heard unexpected noises, he thought about the faces of the people he had killed, alien and human alike, and how those faces visited him in quiet moments. Everything, he said finally. It costs everything. You give up your fear so you can function. You give up your hesitation so you can act. You give up your normal reactions so you can survive. And when it is over, you cannot get those things back. They are just gone. A woman named Megan, the same Megan who had fought in the volcanic vents of Thessor IV, spoke up. The worst part is that it worked. Everything we did, everything we sacrificed, it worked. The aliens are not attacking anymore. Our colonies are safe. Millions of people are alive because of what we did. She paused. And I still cannot figure out if it was worth it. Jake did not have an answer for her. None of them did. Across the country, in a congressional hearing room in Washington, Danny Reeves sat before a committee of senators. He was testifying about the ethics of psychological warfare against alien species. It was the kind of question that civilians asked when they had never seen combat. Senator Diana Walsh, the committee chair, looked at Danny with an expression that mixed respect with skepticism. Chief Petty Officer Reeves, some critics have argued that the tactics employed by Special Operations Forces during the hegemony conflict were unnecessarily brutal. They suggest that more conventional approaches might have achieved the same results without the psychological damage inflicted on alien populations. Danny kept his face neutral. Senator, I respect those critics, but I would ask them a question in return. How many human lives are worth one alien's peace of mind? That seems like a false choice. It is not. The hegemony had us outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Their technology was more advanced. Their resources were greater. If we had fought them conventionally, we would have lost. Millions of humans would have died. Maybe billions. Danny paused. We chose a different path. We made them afraid. We made them understand that fighting us would cost more than they were willing to pay. And because of that fear, they stopped fighting. So you believe the ends justify the means? Danny thought about the Corvani guards he had killed on Thessor IV. He thought about their families, their friends, the lives they would never live. He thought about the human researchers he had saved, their families, their futures. I believe, Danny said slowly, that we had no good options. Only bad ones, and worse ones. We chose the bad ones. We live with that choice, every day. But I would make the same choice again, because the alternative was worse. The senator did not seem satisfied, but she moved on to other questions. In Geneva, Switzerland, Ambassador Vex then sat across from Secretary of State Ben Castillo. They were finalizing the terms of the Treaty of Mutual Recognition, the document that would formally end hostilities between humanity and the hegemony. Vex then had changed over the past 3 years. He was no longer simply afraid of humans. He had come to understand them. At least partially. He had studied their history, their culture, their strange combination of violence and compassion. May I ask you something personal? Vex then said. Castillo nodded. He was a former Army Ranger himself. Though he had transitioned to diplomacy decades ago, he understood both worlds. Your species spent centuries fighting among yourselves, Vex then said. Your history is filled with wars and atrocities. And yet you also created art, music, philosophy. You built systems designed to protect the weak from the strong. How do you reconcile these contradictions? Castillo considered the question. We do not reconcile them. We live with them. Humans are capable of terrible things and wonderful things, often at the same time. Our warriors are trained to kill, but they are also trained to protect. Our scientists create weapons, but they also cure diseases. We are not consistent. We are not logical. We are just human. The hegemony spent 8 centuries building our alliance through careful, rational planning. You achieved comparable status in 15 years through sheer willpower and the strategic application of your most exceptional individuals. Vex then shook his head slowly. It should not have been possible. And yet here we are. Here we are, Vex then agreed. Signing a treaty that acknowledges humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. He paused. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if we had simply welcomed you when you first arrived. If we had offered trade and cooperation instead of threats and demands. We wondered the same thing, Castillo said. We sent peaceful envoys first. Your people killed them. We tried diplomacy. Your people ignored it. We had no choice but to demonstrate that we could not be bullied. And you demonstrated it effectively. Too effectively, perhaps. We wanted respect. We got fear. They are not the same thing. The treaty was signed later that day. Representatives from both sides gathered for photographs and formal statements. Among the honor guard standing at attention were several members of Human Special Operations Forces. Jake Hartley was there, assigned to diplomatic security once again. Danny Reeves stood beside him, representing the Navy. They were not there as a threat. They were there as a reminder. A reminder of what humanity had built and what it had cost. After the ceremony, Vex then approached Jake. The old Corvani diplomat studied the human's face, looking for something he could understand. "I have a question," Vex then said. "One I have wanted to ask for many years." Jake nodded. "Go ahead. Were you always this frightening, or did you become this way?" Jake thought about his childhood in a small town in Ohio. He thought about his parents, his teachers, his friends. He thought about the recruiter who had convinced him to join the army, and the instructors who had pushed him beyond every limit he thought he had. He thought about the missions and the kills and the long nights, wondering if any of it meant anything. "We were farmers," Jake said finally. "Explorers. Teachers. We built families and communities and dreams. Then we met the galaxy, and the galaxy tried to kill us." He looked at Vex then with eyes that held no anger, no fear, only a deep and quiet sadness. "We just learned faster than anyone expected." Vex then nodded slowly. He understood now, as much as any alien could understand humanity. They were not monsters. They were not demons. They were simply survivors who had adapted to a universe that had tried to destroy them, and in adapting, they had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that could not be conquered through force or intimidation. Something that would fight until the very end. No matter the cost. The hegemony had learned to fear human soldiers. Then they had met the elite forces. And now they understood that the only path forward was peace. Not because humans wanted peace more than war, but because the alternative was a conflict that would end only when one side was completely destroyed. The humans would not be destroyed. The hegemony had become certain of that. So peace it would be. Jake Hartley watched Vex then walk away. Then turned to look at the stars visible through the window. Somewhere out there, human colonies were growing. Human children were being born. Human dreams were being built. He had helped make that possible. He and Danny and Megan and all the others who had given everything they had. It had cost them more than anyone would ever know. But looking at those stars, at the future they had secured, Jake allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, it had been worth it.